Well, the young people that come to Seeds of Peace are chosen by their governments. They are representing their governments. So they come, along with some of their teachers, they come expected to never compromise, never back down, and never make friends with anybody who's on the other side. So this is, which is a nice, I like that, because that's a nice challenge. We haven't chosen them, and I know that all of that will fade away in the process. So when they come, they're very self-important. Some of the teachers are unbelievable. They come to a camp in Maine wearing a suit and tie, and you know, and the women are in dresses and high heels. And if any of you have been to a children's camp, you know that high heels would be the most dangerous thing you could be wearing. But anyway, they get over that. In the process of our camp, they discover a lot about themselves. And one of the things they discover is that they're normal, and so are the other people. That they have a common humanity, and they discover that a lot of the things that they've been told about the people on the other side, and vice versa, are just simply untrue based on their experience at camp. So they are able to sleep right next to the people who are supposed to be the ones who hate them and want to kill them. And you know, if you're asleep, you couldn't be more vulnerable than when you were asleep, except maybe if you were in a coma. So that's a big risk that they take. And then they're not with their teachers. Their teachers are on another side of camp having their own risk problems. They're also sleeping with teachers who are dangerous enemies who want to kill them. So, you know, they take such a huge risk just the first night. And later on they tell us how they felt, sleeping next. And sometimes they're surrounded, like it would be like an Israeli, Palestinian, an Israeli, a Jordanian, an Egyptian, and they have them above them on bunk beds. I mean, it's unbelievable what they take a risk doing. So they're very brave, and of course you can't be brave if you're not scared first. So they are scared first, but they're so tired when they make the trip because they have traveled for many hours, and usually a minimum of 16 hours, sometimes more. If they come from Afghanistan, they've usually been traveling for 3 days. And they are tired, and they just go to sleep. When they wake up in the morning, nobody has stabbed them. Nobody has done anything to hurt them. And the guy or the girl getting out of bed next to them is sleepy-eyed, also needs to go to the bathroom, also will brush her teeth, also will put on their pants with one leg at a time. All those things are going to happen, and they live together as if they were family or friends. And in the process of doing that, they make adjustments. So even during the first week, they don't have the same level of fear that they had when they came by any means. And because they live as if they were living with friends or family, they eat together, they play games together, they learn things together, and sleep right next to each other. They clean up the bunk together, they sing songs together, all that stuff, talk a lot. They gradually become friends. And when they leave Seeds of Peace camp, we can barely get them extricated from each other. They are clinging to each other because they have fallen in love with each other. They care about each other. They are their family, and they may not see each other again. And also, there's a strong possibility that harm will come to their friends. So at that moment, I feel very cruel because I am taking them away from a very strong emotional experience that has opened up the world for them and has also given them a view of what life could be. Not should be, but what could be. If they and the adults in their world wanted to do it. It could happen. And when you come, our campus in Maine, when you first drive into Maine, there's a great big sign and it says, "Welcome to Maine, the way life should be." Sort of presumptuous, but what we've done is we have our own sign. It says, "Welcome to Seeds of Peace, the way life could be," because I don't want to should them. I want to could them. They could do it. It could happen. And so when they leave us, they can't stand the fact that they're not going to see each other for a while. If they are from the Middle East or South Asia, Central Asia, they will see each other again, most likely, because we do bring them together on a regular basis. The ones in the Middle East get together all the time, like once a week. And they write magazines together, and they are on Facebook, like you wouldn't believe. I have to be on Facebook all the time or I wouldn't know what was going on. And they stay very much in touch with each other. But that's how they leave. And if you saw them when they came, and they are not interested. But we start right away with play. As soon as they get off the bus, we have a crazy band made up instruments, and the counselors are as crazy as they could be because they're so excited to see them. And then the kids get off, and all of a sudden here they are in this fabulous, exciting place where people are singing and dancing right away, and they're so happy to see them. So I think it's a whole new perspective that they get on the possibilities of life for them.
One of the things you were able to show a film in one of my classes earlier this week that profiled 2 youth from your camp talking about this issue of suicide bombers, and the language, from the Israeli side was on terrorists. That's the label that they use to talk about these individuals who do these actions. And the Palestinian girl, I think, was talking about different kinds of language. She wasn't calling them terrorists or suicide bombers. She was calling them freedom fighters. And they both had this very distinct way of identifying this other person. Neither one were, but this other. And by the end of the film, they weren't agreeing on the mission and goals of these third people, but they were borrowing language from each other. They were allowing the possibility that there were other ways of thinking about it. And I do think that in some sense, that's evidence of some kind of identity shift. They weren't agreeing with the behavior or not agreeing with behavior, but they were learning to think about language and identity, I think, in a new way. Do you see that kind of thing happening a lot at the end of the camp?
Oh, absolutely. It's so evident. They really are seeing each other as human beings. There's no question about it. And in the beginning, they are using all the hot button kinds of language that fuels the conflict at home. And a number of ours now, see, we've been in existence for 19 years, so a number of most everybody in Seeds of Peace is an adult. And several of them are newscasters. And for example, in Israel and in Palestine, if you're a newscaster, you write your script. It's not like here where they're looking at a teleprompter, probably. And they write their own script, but they have told me that they don't use those hot button words when they describe what happened. They're not going to say 3 militants were killed in Gaza today. They're not going to say that. They'll say 3 people were killed.
It's radical.
It's a radical change.
How did your youth learn? How do they see themselves? How would they describe themselves to you on day one of your interaction?
You know, that's a good question, and I'm not sure I could actually answer it in that way, because I have to mostly get unobtrusive observation gives me the feedback on what the kids are dealing with. But just one example I can think of is that this one child that had been, the one that had been locked in the burning vehicle, he didn't have any hands left, but he was learning to write with his foot. So so what our goal was when we were working with him and other people was to help them regain control over normal function and daily activities. So does that mean, can I get dressed on my own? You know, can I write my name? So we were working on identity through play in that way, is to helping them become more functionally independent. And with the language barrier, I don't know exactly what they were thinking, especially the kids in China.
Yeah.
You know, but again, it was really trying to work on normalizing function, giving them independence and control over their environments.
Could you speak to how the culture sees those children?
Well,
Yeah,
this
from
picture
the
out here,
outside coming in?
yeah, this picture here is actually, I was standing, taking the picture from this direction, and I was with some of the other musicians and some of the people, and a woman, I was with Breckenchen Schwartz, who runs an organization called Handreach, is the NGO that I'm affiliated with when I go to China, and she speaks Mandarin. And a woman came up to her and said, "Look at these kids, they're just so odd." And she said, "Well, what's wrong with them?" You know, and she couldn't really get it. I don't think they're perceived as functioning, independent. And I guess you can look, what this speaks to is how different cultures either warehouse or hide disability. So how disability is viewed in other cultures, you can see that come out. I mean, they're not viewed as normal and well integrated into the community. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I think the question then is how much that speaks to how the kids wind up feeling about themselves. And I'm assuming there's probably some relationship between those two things.
Yeah, and I think that what I see, at least when I'm with them, is sort of, I see them smiling, and they're happy, and they're engaged, so I know that we're making an impact.
Yeah. And I think the very same, yeah.
You know, all of our kids get placed with us, so somebody else put them in our program, and you know, what strikes me is where they came from was they were the kid in the neighborhood that was, you know, the one that caused trouble, and the one that, you know, was running around and not in control. And depending on their situation, if it was a situation where there was a family issue, you know, they're the identified family in the neighborhood that is sort of, they're very alone. You know, when you think about what the kids that I work with feel like, I think they feel really alone, really isolated, really damaged. They generally feel really stupid and unwanted. And I think one of the things that I said before, I think it's kind of crazy to stick all these kids in the same program. But what they do get is they meet other kids that feel the same way, and that there's some bonding that happens and some sort of realization that, well, I'm not the only one like this that has these problems, and I think there's some value in that. You asked, you know, what they're like when they leave. Very often, there's not a whole lot of visible difference. I mean, there's some, and that years ago, the person that ran our agency, Dr. Trishman, Al Trishman, who was quite a well-known psychologist at the time. He passed away many, many years ago. My wife and I ran a group home at Walker, and so we lived with 6 or 7 kids like this. We had one kid who just didn't seem to be making any progress, and so, you know, we talked to Al, and I said, you know, we're getting nowhere with this kid. And he said, well, you're giving him like 1 year, 1 month, whatever amount of time of good care. You're taking care of him. You're showing him what the possibilities are, and that will make a difference. And I think so often, you know, getting back to that idea of resiliency, the years right after, we have kids from the age of about 4, you know, they don't stay within the age span of 4 to 13 or so. And generally, if you leave around 13, some not great things are going to happen for a few years. But very often, I'll get a call. In fact, I got a call earlier, or in September from somebody I'd worked with 25 years ago, who now had a family, and he was, you know, things weren't perfect, and certainly along the way there was drugs and alcohol and all kinds of problems. But now he transcended that, and he was doing great. And so that, you know, I wonder about your kids. You know, you're there for 19 years. In 30, you know, in another 20 years, what are the possibilities? I imagine that goes through your mind.
We'll leave it now.
Yeah.
Rachel, how do the kids that you meet every day, what would they, if you ask them, tell me about yourself, what would they say to you?
Well, something that really surprised me from the beginning was when I first started working with the kindergartners in after school, something we focused on was you're special, and building that up. And what I saw a lot was a lot of kindergartners could say, yes, I am special, I am, and think about what they can do now. But when we turn the focus to what do you want to do when you grow up, what do you want to be, they all seem to have trouble with that, being able to envision themselves growing up and where they were going. And so that's something that I know we focus on a lot in Peace Through Play also, is just empowerment and showing them that they can do whatever they want to do, and thinking to the future, that to have that vision. And then another quick story, one of the schools that I work in now, and that we've worked in for a while through Peace Through Play, it's really great because we're able to see these kids who started out in kindergarten getting Peace Through Play and have kind of gone through it through the years. And I was working with one of the boys on his homework in a separate room. We were finishing it up before he could play. And out of the blue, as he's alphabetizing his spelling words, he turns to me and goes, you know what my dad called me the other day? He said, I'm a violent little kid. And I'm thinking, all right, well, why did he say that? And he's explaining, like, oh, I was smashing my cousin's toys together. I was, you know, doing that. And I thought, all right, so what do you think about that? Like, are you a violent little kid? And I could tell that when he was telling me what his dad said, he wasn't sure if he should be proud or if he should be embarrassed. He didn't know. And when I asked him, so are you? Is that how you see yourself? He thought about it and he said, no, I'm just a kid. And so being able to work through that with him and process, it made me think about the way that parents' views can affect how their children view themselves, but then also how you can get beyond that, and the way that he was able to think about it and think, no, you know, I have potential to be more than just this violent person playing with these toys, was a really cool thing to see. And he's in 3rd grade, so the way that he's been able to go through our program and build up those skills was really great.
You get them when they're teeny tiny and they leave ready for school.
You get them at the best age.
Yeah.
Because they're 3 years old and they're egocentric. They think everything they do is great. They think their pictures are beautiful and they're the smartest and the strongest. And basically we want to keep that. When we have children go to kindergarten, and we do surveys afterwards to see how did your child adapt and what kind of transition did they have to kindergarten, we generally get excellent results. Our children are ready to go to school because we want to do things like foster the love of learning. We want them to be creative beings. We want them to learn to resolve conflict through words and not actions. And all of those things can be accomplished through play. So that's, I think, how our children enter, and that's how they leave. And they leave as empathetic beings because through play they can learn things like empathy and give and take and those sorts of things. So I think the way they come in is kind of the way, only a little bit more than we want them to come out.